to today's team brief. Thanks for taking the time to log in and join us. Bit lonely today. There's normally a range of people that come and join us on these calls. Thankfully, Rob Simcox, Director of People, has come to make sure I'm not completely on my own. And as always, we've got Liv from Comms in the background, making sure that this works and functions. Slides come up and that we get your questions and respond to you. So just the three of us today. So thanks for joining. What we're going to cover today, a quick conversation about winter planning and winter. We obviously start that planning early. It's something we do all the time. So a chat about that. A message from our nerve centre teams, which I'm going to talk to you about. Importantly, it's Pride Month. Some of the things that are going on at SFH. And then Rob's going to come and talk to us about the MARS, the mutually agreed resignation scheme, which I know Rob and Debbie came, I think it was last week, and really good attendance. We were just talking a few hundred people who joined to listen to that and ask some questions. So we thought we were worth running that question and answer opportunity again today. And most importantly, the bit I always forget to say at the beginning, the bit that matters on this is your questions, your opportunity to ask myself and Rob anything, any comments, questions. If we can help you today, we'll respond. If not, we'll come back to you afterwards. But this is your team brief. You're the ones that matter on this. We're just the mouthpieces, as I say. So if I crack on with the agenda before Liv tells me off, you know me, I always go off piste and cause chaos. I'm going to try and stick to the agenda. And the first thing we were going to talk about was winter, which when it's sunny and hot, it seems a bit of a stupid thing to talk about. And most of you know the hospital's busy and pressured all year round. So why do we talk about winter pressures? But we do have a period of time over the winter months where it tends to get exceptionally worse. And the best way to prepare for that is learn from the previous years, plan early in advance. And the bit I'm really keen to try and get better at is get your advice, comments and thoughts about what things could we do differently. You're the ones working out in the clinical areas. You're the ones near the patients. You know, we might have lots of good ideas and schemes that we think will help with winter, but equally, what would be better for you? What would be better for patients in your environment, your area? And I think if we look at last year, we've already agreed some schemes following your feedback. Children's Assessment Unit was extended and the opening hours increased. We had a scheme where we increased more respiratory consultants over weekends during that winter period. So it's really important you send these ideas in. Nothing's too wacky, nothing stupid. Talk to your line managers. You can email the comms email address. Liv will put that in the chat after. But don't be afraid to share your ideas and comments. If there are things that we can't do, we might say so. But I think it's really a plea. What can we do to make things better this year? And I'm going to talk about the hot weather, which seems stupid, doesn't it? Straight after talking about winter and winter planning. But we've had a heat alert, yellow heat alert issued today for this coming week. It looks like we'll be up to 30 plus degrees by the middle of the week and over the weekend. Clearly, that makes it really challenging for you in the working environment and for your patients and colleagues. So look at the heat plan, look at the action cards that give you advice and guidance on things you can do. I think for those of you in the clinical areas, in the towers, we put a lot of comms out a few weeks ago about how we can get the best of the air cooling, air dumping system that we have in the towers. And that requires you to keep the windows closed all the time, which sounds counterproductive. And certainly for your patients and relatives, they think we're nuts sometimes when we close all the windows. But cold air is dumped in the towers in the morning. We need the windows shut to allow that to circulate and make sure that the wards are cool. Lots of other areas and estates don't have that air cooling system, so I appreciate that's difficult for you. So it's keeping yourselves hydrated, dressing appropriately. If you're in an area that doesn't have the cooling system, opening sort of windows and doors. But I think hydration is a key thing, and not just for our patients, for you as our staff and colleagues. But there'll be plenty of briefings that will come out. Make sure you look at those. Again, talk to your line managers if there's anything that you think we can do differently. Moving on from weather. Got any questions, put them in the chat, although my chat says there's a problem. I don't know if you can see, Rob or Liv, the questions, so we might have to pick that bit up in a minute. But in the meantime, I'll move on to the updates and then we'll do questions at the end. Hopefully that'll be rectified. Nerve centre devices. It's a bit of a plea from NHIS really, that if you're moving jobs, or if you're a resident doctor changing rotation soon, that you hand your nerve centre device back in. Now, these cost us about £520 per person. So what we need people to do is when you're moving on, pass that back in. It can be reused and recycled with another member of staff. You can give that to your line manager, or you can hand it in directly to NHIS. But again, we'll put all these links into the meeting chat, which Liv will do for us. So Liv's saying in one of the chats I can see that she can see the questions, but I can't in mine. So maybe that's good we haven't got any yet. But we'll see how we get on, Liv. And then the final update from me, it's Pride Month here at SFH, but it's Pride Month in general. But SFH, we're doing our focus in July. I think we started off with the first march down at MCH, which apparently went really well and was well attended. I think Mitchell's got pictures and videos, etc., that will be coming shortly. And then we've got another 2 events, Newark, which is Thursday the 17th of July, and Kings Mill site, which is the 21st. But Liv will put those in the chat as well. And this is a chance for anyone to partake. This is, for me, it's about supporting colleagues and the organisation. It's about allyship to our colleagues and patients, the chance to learn and educate yourselves around LGBTQ+, if it's not something that you think you've got a lot of knowledge about. It's an opportunity to celebrate and just show what an inclusive organisation we are and want to be. So please come along to those events, and Liv will put that in the chat. So I think that's all I've got in the way of updates. Bringing on to the main event now, Rob, if you know if you can call that before. So another update on the Mars.
Thank you, Phil. It is lunchtime, isn't it? So afternoon, everyone. Nice to see we've got about 80 of us on the call. So I'll run over some key points, if that's okay, Phil, around the mutually agreeable resignation scheme that we've got live in the trust, and noting that we've got a bit of time left. I'm suggesting, Phil, perhaps we think about taking a few questions. I'm conscious that we are running a Mars scheme in the trust, and it's the first time we've done one in a while. So there may be colleagues on the call today that are a little bit unfamiliar about what the scheme is. So I thought I'd just spend a few moments just talking a little bit about the scheme and the details of it. So the title's a big key. It's a resignation scheme. I really do want to stress this is totally voluntary, totally the individual's choice, and is no way associated with redundancies. And I think it's also fair to say we're not alone as an NHS organisation and running a scheme from my networks. This is quite common practice, both locally and nationally at the moment. And in a nutshell, it's a process where the individual chooses to leave Sherwood, and upon leaving the trust, there is some monetary severance that's paid, and that could be up to a maximum of 12 months salary. There is a minimum payment, and that's based on 3 months, and some of this is also capped at £80,000. What I will stress is this is only open for colleagues that are in non-patient facing roles. And I must stress that for any scheme to be supported, it must have and must demonstrate, should I say, contributions towards long-term improvements to the trust's wider financial position. The scheme's been open a week now, opened officially last Tuesday, and run through till the 28th of July. And I suspect people have got questions. And the next slide talks a little bit about where those questions can be accessed. So we've introduced a dedicated microsite. The link is there, and I'm sure Liv will kindly pop that in the chat for people to access. On the microsite, there's some really comprehensive questions. We've been adding to our frequently asked questions as some of the drop-in sessions have taken place. We've now ran 3 drop-in sessions, and we've probably had upwards of about 40 to 50 people attend those. So when questions are asked through that space, we've updated the FAQ. So a little plug to people. You might have accessed it previously. I would encourage you accessing it again, because we're always updating questions that come through the process. And noting some of the interest through the drop-in sessions, we are exploring putting a couple of more dates on. So you can see a date on next Thursday and next Tuesday. We might just think about putting a little more in that space for people to come along to have personal questions, conversations. I will stress all of those drop-in sessions are confidential, and what we do have is a HR professional there that can give some steer around questions you might have, but we also have someone from Pay Services that can give you a bit of an indicative idea of what any monetary value for the scheme would be. So Phil, that was all the main points I wanted to cover, really. Scheme's open. If you've got questions, let's use some of the time to hopefully work them through. But if you feel some of those questions are perhaps a little bit sensitive to you as an individual, we've got a couple of more drop-in sessions planned between now and when the programme or the scheme window closes. And noting the success we've had of interest at those sessions, we will look to put on a few more so people have got time to seek advice. I'm waffling, Phil, just trying to pad out to see if we've got any questions coming through.
That's great, Rob. I think the road shows are a prime example of something that people have found really useful. Those numbers in the first week are big, and I think having people from different departments to help answer questions and give people as much information as we can to make an informed decision. Remembering it's got to be the individual's decision at the first point, which is then discussed and agreed with your managers, that mutual bit that's important, and then the panel that Rob spoke about before. I think the microsite, good link back to that, Rob. I didn't realise it's updated regularly. I think that's really good. It's something live and continually changing. That's an easy thing that you can just look at on your own, can't you?
And it's accessible on your mobile phone and stuff. So we've tried to make it as inclusive as possible for people. We know some colleagues don't always get a chance to look at this, or they might want to look at it at their lunch break or something, a bit more discreet away from their office environment.
Yeah. Got a question, Rob, asking about partial retirement. Does this still count as unbroken service, given the fact the contract's not been broken?
So we've so good question, and actually we've got an FAQ on this within the guide, because we've had some further guidance since the scheme's been live. So actually it's considered as a break in service because you've been able to access the pension scheme. So if individuals, colleagues have partially retired, that means that the service then becomes broken and then is reset from the date that partial retirement commenced from.
Helpful. Rob, how many applications we had so far? Do we know that?
That's not a figure I've got to hand, Phil. And I think realistically, it might be a bit sensitive if we were to start to disclose applications from a number perspective, noting the programme's still live.
Yeah, no, good point. I'm just reading as we talk, Rob. So this one's saying, have we had many applications for Mars, which you just covered, your response to that? If we don't have sufficient individuals wanting Mars, will this lead to redundancy, etc.?
So, I'm happy to go on record. We've got no plans for redundancies as an organisation at this time. And equally, we haven't got a defined number of how many Mars applications we'll need. The idea of running such a scheme is to transact and hopefully enable change to happen more naturally, where individuals may choose to leave teams, enables us to think a little bit around how teams might be reconfigured. So it's a platform to enable change is probably the best way of describing it, Phil. But as it stands, got no plans around redundancies.
Yeah, no, that's important. And I think that in the title Mars, I think people sometimes get confused that the R is redundancy, and it's not, as you clearly say there, totally different process. Anything else people want to put in? We've had apologies while I'm looking still having trouble with my question section, and Liv Help is trying to put them into the our chat because they're not coming up in the.
So we're not got any more. What I do hope, and again, padding for time, while perhaps the colleagues think a little bit about if they've got questions. The microsite, as I said, a really useful tool platform. We've got quite a number of questions on there. Some of those questions are based on the drop-in sessions that have happened, and they're actual questions that people are starting to ask collectively. And we've also got the drop-in sessions where if people want a bit more of a person-centered discussion around them and their circumstances, it's all done in a quite, a safe space, confidential environment. And we've got some breakout rooms where people can go and have conversations away from the main environment.
I think that's really important. I was going to ask that about what if I don't want people to know my business or what to do it confidentiality. There's another one there about at what point would I be able to look for a new employment if I took Mars?
Yeah, so if you took Mars, there needs to be a break, and that break is for 3 months. If for whatever reason you felt you needed to return within that 3 month, there is some penalties that you would incur in relation to having to pay back some of the monetary value that's been provided.
And does it make any difference whether I look for employment back in the trust, Rob, as opposed to something completely outside of the NHS?
So if you were to take work outside the NHS, perhaps in the private sector, that's where some of those restrictions reduce even further. And clearly there is a choice here for individuals. I'll go back to this is mutually agreeable, and I'm conscious that what individuals might think around their ability to pick up work might be dependent on their own skill set or their own levels of confidence to pick up work. So in a nutshell, it's 3 months.
Yeah, that's helpful. And all these will be in the FAQs that you referenced as well.
Yeah, that's correct.
Another one just coming here, Rob. It says, what sort of workforce change will you be considering? Will you be downbanding people? I don't know if you mentioned workforce change, did you? Or is that just a question someone's asking in general?
I suspect what the question is around change. So, if there are, if there's a say interest in Mars within one department or one team, that might then propose thinking about delivering the service a little bit different, and therefore workforce change prevailing. Clearly, any workforce change, we do have a policy on this, Phil, and part of that policy talks about ensuring there's reasonable, proportionate consultation around change, because the change for, say, you might be different to me. And there's an opportunity then to have relevant one-to-one conversation through that process. As an outcome of workforce change, it might be that the role changes. And I think the questions there about would there then be a downbanding process? I can give you my personal view, Phil, around downbanding. It doesn't serve the purpose for me, because actually the individual is then being asked to do a different job, but there's an element often of pay protection prevailing. The individual team then become quite demotivated. So I always advise around steering away from downbanding colleagues within teams, because it's often counterproductive. It's more around how the service might be delivered differently with, a smaller number of people. And some of that is starting to embrace some of the digital technology that's out there, and how we might want to embrace change through automation, for instance.
Yeah. But if I was to be successful and take Mars, what it might be about, do you need to replace me like for like? Is there something different or a different model of delivering my role that could be considered?
Could it be done on that? Yeah, could be done on less hours, for instance.
Or in a different way, like you say.
Or in a different way, yeah.
Yeah. A really good one that's just coming here, the link to that, is how will the workload of the leaving staff be managed?
And I think that's part of the application process. So when the form is completed, there needs to be some consideration of how that work will be redistributed amongst the team. because part of the scheme describes that there must be some financial benefit for that post being removed, so to speak. Clearly, what we don't want to do is then create busier, more pressured roles for teams that are already busy and pressured. So part of that's the application, and inevitably, if it doesn't stack up, it wouldn't be supported.
And that's a tricky one, isn't it? I get people's anxiety on that. If a couple of people in my team are, successful and go on Mars, I don't want to pick all that work up. I'm already busy. And certainly if there's more than one applicant within a team, I could imagine that's another area of concern. But I think you described there, that's why the application and then the process of review by the divisional teams first, and then the panel is going to be really important in this, not to create more risk and pressure to others.
And there's a question there about, in this circumstance where there's multiple applications from one team, how's that managed?
Yeah.
And how will these be assessed fairly? What I hadn't touched on is that there is a panel of review post the window of so once the window of applications closed, there will be almost like a helicopter type panel that reviews all the applications on merit. And clearly, when we may have multiple applications from one team or one department, for instance, that's then the value of exploring. Can they be all supported? Can some be supported? And that's the tricky bit, Phil, because what we don't want to do is compromise service delivery here. Because fundamentally, you could destabilize one team.
Yeah. And you're able to share with people on the call who's on that panel? You talk about the helicopter panel.
Yes, I can. So I will be chairing the panel, and that'll be supported by our chief nurse, as in yourself, Phil, our chief finance officer, as in Rich Mills, and the incoming chief operating officer, which is Simon Illingworth, that starts with the trust on Monday. And what we tried to do is have a bit of a balance of a clinical view. We, as in yourself, Phil, we are a provider of healthcare, and any decisions we choose to take, we want to ensure that it has been appropriately quality impact assessed. Hence, your hat on the panel, so to speak, seat at the table.
And before it comes to us in that panel, it will have gone through a line manager or divisional team. How's that bit going to work?
So the original site, so there's an application and then there's a sign-off process by the individual's line manager. And what we're encouraging for any leaders on the call, that details of that application, whether that's supported or not, is shared with your triumvirate in a divisional perspective, or with some of the senior leadership team across the corporate areas.
Thank you. Quite a few questions in there, Rob, which is thanks to you all for sending these in. It's really important you ask these questions. So just for a bit of a recap, I think someone's typing now, I'm going to recap. I think you've got the road shows and drop-ins, which are in the chat. Feel free and join those. Rob's been really clear about the microsite, continuously updated, and that's there. You can approach your people department if you want some bespoke one-to-one support. Don't forget your line managers and people in your teams that will be able to give you some support around this as well. And I'm sure we'll do some more updates and briefings, Rob, won't we, like this?
Yeah, Liv, when's the next team brief?
2 weeks today.
Yeah, so that'd be the 22nd. So Liv, I'm happy to drop on and do something similar again. I think we had nearly 100 colleagues at one point on today's call. So it might just be another forum just to ask a few questions. Obviously all the questions that are shared today are anonymous, which might just be a bit more of a safer space for people to maybe ask questions if they've got any points that need clarifying, or any points of that they may be curious about.
That'd be good, Rob. And in view of the amount of questions we've had in the last 2 weeks, it's certainly worth keeping these sessions going. I think this is the topic that's generated the most sort of question and answers in the time I've been doing these. Last one here, Rob. Is Mars not just for corporate?
The way I've described it to people when asked, this is for colleagues that are in non-patient facing roles. So that includes colleagues in corporate areas and divisional teams. So, you know, it's a vital profession, as often those roles contribute indirectly to patient care. So do want to stress that. In answer to your question, it's not just corporate. It's all roles across the organisation that are considered as non-patient facing.
Fab. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for your time again today, and thanks to you and your team for all the extra work and effort they're putting in to try and provide the relevant information and support to our colleagues out there around this topic. So we've had an update on Mars, another one back in 2 weeks. Just recap what we've discussed today. Winter planning. So thinking ahead, we really need your support and ideas. Please get those into us via comms or your line managers. We spoke about the hot weather. You need to look after yourselves and also your colleagues, patients during these next few weeks. Plea from the Nerve Centre team about returning devices if no longer in use or needed. Really important not to forget Pride celebrations, chance to sort of recognise, support and provide some allyship to our colleagues, as well as educating ourselves. And then Rob's given us another really useful update on the Mars scheme. So if that's it, can't see any more questions, we'll wrap it up there. Massive thank you from both me and Rob for all your ongoing hard work. It remains really pressure, doesn't it, and relentless out there. So really conscious of that, really grateful for all the time and effort that you and your teams go to. And you know, all that impacts on our patients, and I know our patients are grateful for the services and care we deliver here. So don't forget our core purpose of what we're here for, and you will contribute massively to that. Look after yourselves in the hot weather, try and enjoy it, whether it's barbecue or a few beers or a bit of sunbathing. Do it safely, and see you all soon.
Thanks everyone.